Hi, this is Jody Colegrove with Quantum Techniques. We have the most diagnostic form of energy medicine in the world today. I work with people all over the world, over the phone, helping them find out why they are having their health issue and what they can do about it. So I received an email from a friend of mine that said, how do you function with being a Christian and then with the alternative medicine and dealing with things like muscle testing, chakras, chi, and Christianity? And that's a big question. So it's something I've always wanted to kind of do a video on, so I thought, here's my chance. So I was raised in a church that believed very much in mind, body, spirit, and that connection. And that if you don't heal one of those or have a balance in one of those, you are going to be sick. And one of their main things of the church was a health message. Now, so I kind of was raised in that, and so I realized when starting Quantum Techniques how much of a good fit it was for me, because that's kind of how I was raised. So I want to just kind of share a couple ideas to maybe help you kind of bridge the gap between all of those. So the first thing is, Qi is very much of a Chinese life force. When I did my studying, that's what they said, is that Qi is kind of that life force that you have, and so it's, we could, if Christianity, you could figure that as a soul or your inner breath from God. So those kind of things, they just maybe call it a different thing because they were in a different part of the country or the world, and that's how they were able to understand that. Then the chakras are different centers of connection throughout our body. And I actually have a really good book that a friend recommended that I'm going to be studying, and I'll share that with you later, about the chakras and kind of seeing how that all relates. But there are different places that when your body is struggling with different aspects of life, those chakras will be involved. So I'm just going to give an example. When I started in Quantum Techniques, I started working with healing and things like that, and I started finding that I kept wearing more color blue or color purple, and those tend to be the top two chakras of being in kind of your spiritual connection and with others and your thinking brain. And so that didn't surprise me, but that's just kind of what I noticed, and because those are the colors of those chakras. Another thing that we find is that if you're having issues being able to speak your truth, which is this chakra here, that will sometimes be weak, and that's where your thyroid is. And so we don't necessarily in Quantum Techniques talk about the different chakras, but we are aware of them and constantly learning how they affect the body and what we do with our testing. So another thing is biofeedback. And, when we do muscle testing, we are able to kind of get back from the body what's going on. Why is it in balance? Why is it not in balance? And that kind of thing. So that is kind of a biofeedback technique. I know that there's a machine that you can put on your finger, and it registers your heart rate and how fast or slow it goes. And so then if you add, let's say, a tomato and put it near you, it will actually make, and you're bad on nightshades and tomatoes, then it will make that heart monitor go down. Same thing with like corn chips and things like that. So that's a form of feedback. Well, we do the same thing when we muscle test, and we find out, okay, corn will be healthy, corn will be sick, and find out if that is affecting you or not. So another thing is Reiki. Steve always tells his story about when he was a psychologist and meeting with people, and they said, oh, I just got the most unique massage. And the guy ran his hands over the top of my body and moved my energy around. And Steve goes, that's nuts, And now that's kind of, in some instance, what we do. We're moving that energy around the body so the body can focus on where it's lost energy. If you've ever had any kind of massage, sometimes, and it's really good to find a massage guy that can do your stomach and do lymphatics. But a lot of times your stomach areas will be kind of cold, if you ever notice that, or a certain area your body will be kind of cold. And that's that heat of the whole body is not in that area. And so that's what a massage does, is it balances the hot and the cold in those areas. And that's kind of what Reiki is doing also. Now, I did have a teacher in my college, my Christian college that I went to, that said, if you're doing biofeedback or Reiki, that is kind of the devil. And so, everybody has a different opinion, and so it's always good that you do your own research and decide what you're comfortable in and with. There are certain things that I am not comfortable with, and that's where I've drawn a line, and that's where we have boundaries. And so each person has to have their own boundary in that. Another thing is, in my Christian college, what I learned is that what is sin? Sin is separation from God, and so that can be anything. Now, I will admit that there are some times when quantum techniques creates a separation between me and God, and what happens sometimes is when I wake up in the morning, I immediately go to, okay, well, did I sleep good? Did I notice something? Well, let me code that. Let me make sure all my codes are online and things like that. Instead of thanking God for the day or being grateful for the day when I first wake up. And that's me personally, how sometimes I can use quantum techniques and get in the way of my Christianity and my walk with God. And so I have to be kind of careful of that. And so, quantum techniques sometimes can be like prayer, and so I kind of think about it all the time, and it's just kind of what we do. But we do need to make sure that we put the brakes on, put the boundaries on, and say, no, I'm going to go on my walk and I'm going to talk with God instead of going on my walk and coding. So again, just being aware of how you're using quantum techniques for good, or if it's getting in the way. So how did God heal? This is something we actually don't know because no one really has an account. Now, we do have the Bible that shows us and gives us stories about how he healed. And the three that come to mind that I like the most is there's a time when God walked up to somebody, or someone walked up to God and said, or Christ, I'm sorry, Jesus in the Bible, and said, my hand is crippled. And so God said, stretch out your hand, and it healed itself. Okay. And wow, how, we can't, quantum techniques, we haven't had that miraculous of a healing, but it's like, how did that happen? And I know that Steve has said that one of his theories is that maybe God put that tissue and that person so much in a loving state that love healed. And so it's a good theory. And so, I look forward to finding out how God did those healings back then. But I'm just grateful for what he has allowed us to know now with quantum techniques to help others. One of my favorite stories is in John 5, 5 through 9, and that's about the Pool of Bethesda. The reason I like it is because, the guy, or the system had, this Pool of Bethesda where everybody would go, and if they wanted healing, they watched for the waters to be rippled. And when it did ripple, then they had to be the first one in, and that would create the healing. Well, you can just imagine the scene, they're 4 and 5 deep on either side of this pool, and trying to get the first one in. Well, it talks about the lame person that he couldn't even walk there. And so somebody that had, had more of a non-walking issue could get into the water sooner, and so he was there for 35 years, and that seems like an awful long time to be waiting for healing. And so what I like is that God came up to him and said, what are you doing here? And so he asked him, and he told him, and then he said, would you like to try something different? And I think that reason I like that is because that's what quantum techniques is. Hey, let's try something different. If what you've been doing hasn't worked, whether it's through pharmacology and drugs and things like that, to try to get well, and it's not working, then let's try something different. What do you got to lose, kind of thing. And so sure enough, the guy says, yeah, I will. And so he said, well, then pick up your bed and walk. And sure enough, he did. And so he was healed. Again, that miraculous healing right away was he put in such a love state that he was able to heal. The third healing that kind of comes to mind in the Bible is when they had the crippled man, and his friends found out where Jesus was going to be preaching, and so they couldn't get him in, so they went up on the roof and they took away the roof tiles and they lowered him in. Now, I heard a really neat sermon about this lately, and said, okay, the guy with the arm came to Jesus and said, heal me. Okay, so he was wanting the healing. He was physically saying, I need this. The guy at the Pool of Bethesda, God found him, but he was open and willing enough to try something different. The one with the friend, I'm not sure how much that friend really wanted the healing, because God doesn't ever talk about that. He just says the friends came, cleared the roof, and lowered him, and Jesus saw the pain and healed him. So what the pastor was saying is, okay, so one, the man had faith. The second one, he didn't know he needed it and had it. And then the third one didn't even know that he should have faith. And so a lot of times, say, you need to pray harder or work harder and stuff like that. And in those three examples, healing took place in many different ways. It didn't have to be the same way. And so, sometimes we have people in quantum techniques that heal right away and others we don't. And so we're always kind of being aware that the healing does come from God and trying to find out what it is and do our best. But I think that was a really good lesson for me in healing and things like that. So I don't know if I have answered all your questions, but I personally, as a Christian, being four generations on one side and 5 generations on the other as a Christian, have never had an issue with quantum techniques in that being God's way of helping this world be able to heal. And I like the fact that pretty much everybody on our team is Christian and comes from that divinity. And so they bring that to the practice. And so I feel very comfortable in what I do and sharing it with others. So give me a call. You can visit our website at quantumtechniques.com. And we have lots of information there. You can read more about what we do and how we do it. Steve even has a book out right now that I think really explains quantum techniques. So that's really exciting. I think you probably have a link on the website for that. We also have lots of manuals, codes on there, so you can kind of understand what that is, and also MP3 downloads. And you can also request a session request. And that's an hour of 60 minutes of working with a quantum techniques practitioner. And what that does is help you find out what's going on and what you can do to heal it. So I look forward to working with you. And if you have more questions, send them my way. Blessings.